Okay, it's that time of year again. It's time for the NRL season preview for 2023. We're going to do each club in alphabetical order. I'm going to spend a minute or 2 minutes on each club. So if you're a West Tigers fan, you've got about 20 odd minutes to wait. My apologies, but you can fast forward until you get to the West Tigers bit. So we might save the best for last because I think the West Tigers is the big, from my opinion, the big talking point. They cannot be as bad as last year. So we'll start with the Brisbane Broncos. What happened at the second half of last season? They were looking comfortable, looking like they were going to be a top 8 side, possibly even a top 4 side. Origin period comes along, and the wheels fall off. It wasn't a great end to last season. Losing on the last day to St George as well, and they already had an uphill struggle to make the 8. A lot of pressure on Kevin Walters this season to deliver a top 8 side. I don't think they're quite ready to be a top 4 or top 6 side, but top 8 I think should be on their to-do list, should be on their a start of season objective. And if they fail, what then for Kevin Walters? Is he out the door? Does Benny Ikin go, look, you're a club legend, great player, but coach, I don't think this is the right fit. So there's a lot of pressure on this young squad. I think they would have learnt a lot from last year. The problem is, will that leave some emotional scarring there, a little bit of confidence maybe? A lot hinges on how they start the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. If they get off to a slow start, the pressure builds. So we'll have to see with Brisbane, but they have to be more consistent as well. They might have run out of steam a little bit, I think, with some of the young players coming through, but they've got a good young lineup, some good players in there. Some of the players had a really good World Cup as well, which helps. So there's some confidence with some of the players. It's about channeling that across the whole squad, and then also we've got to see how the trials matches go and what fringe players and young players get thrust into the Elite 30 squad as well come opening night. Canberra Raiders, the team that edged them out for the top 8. As a Raiders fan, I'm trying to keep the bias out of this, but it would be nice to see the Raiders have an injury-free season, or at least be able to put the strongest available squad out from week to week. Injuries did disrupt them. I mean, Jamal Fogarty getting injured in the trials did disrupt the first half of the season, but as soon as he came back in the side, they went on a bit of a run, didn't they? I love the Raiders, but is time running out for Ricky Stewart? I mean, I love Ricky Stewart. He comes out with some things off the cuff in press conferences. He's called Sticky for a reason, but I think the pressure was telling the last couple of years. But with a fully fit side, I think that they aim about 4th, 5th. I think they could make the top 4. They definitely can make the top 8, but they can't afford any injuries, especially in the half-back hooking positions. I think that's a bit of a weakness for me. If Fogarty or Whiten go down injured, I think there are some problems. Although Schneider, in relief, he played well. But I don't think he was fully ready for the rigours of first grade, although he's a good young player coming through to obviously, at some point take over the 6 or 7 jersey. I don't think he was quite ready. But we'll see how the Raiders go, but I think they're going to make the top 8 again. Fingers crossed. Injuries, I think, could be, again, an issue for them. The Bulldogs, Canterbury, I think they're on an upward trend. I think they've made some good signings in the last couple of years for this season. Coaching change, Seraldo. He's done his apprenticeship as an assistant, but some guys are really good as an assistant, not great as a head coach. Look at Trent Barrett. Much was expected when Trent Barrett was brought in. Carl Flanagan, I think when he was given a run in the side towards the second half of last season, he showed what he showed at the Roosters, which was he can be a good controlling halfback. Maybe a bit too structured for the current rule changes, but he also needs a dominant pack going forward, and I don't think that pack over the last couple of years has actually been on the front foot enough. But they've made some. I mean, kick out for Christ's sake, and Mahoney I think should give them some go forward a little bit to ease the pressure off the halfbacks. And Burton, he's got a cannon of a boot, and he's signed an extension, so that I think the signs are positive. Are they ready for top 8? We shall see, but I think they will be aiming up the ladder, not down. I think the signs are there that there is going to be improvement. Again, I would say the first 5-6 weeks are going to give us an idea of where this side is trending. If they get off to a confident start, I mean, let's say win 3 out of the first 5 games, I think that's a positive start. We shall see, but I think trending upwards. Cronulla, I'm expecting more of the same, really, but they've got to avoid. Fitzgibbon's got to avoid that second season syndrome. It's his second season as a head coach now. The green shoots are there, and Nico Hines has got to back up that Dally M medal performance with another solid season, controlling in the halves. Great piece of contract work there, picking him up from the Melbourne Storm. Big mistake by the Storm letting him go. And then you've got Finucane as a leader as well. So they've got 2 really good players that they've nicked from the Storm that have added a little bit of a bit of leadership, I think, which Cronulla were lacking. Of course, Andrew Fafita is now retired because of injuries. They lose that kind of leadership from the dressing room. But hey, look, I think they're again trending in a good direction, and I want to see a repeat performance, top 4, top 5. I think is well within their grasp. And if they go on a run like they did last year, where they just were winning games constantly, and in previous seasons they would have lost those games, I think they would have learnt a lot from. They would have learnt a lot from losing out in the finals and not having the best finals campaign. Those are lessons that they will take on board. I think they could be quite dangerous and could even make a grand final. I do believe that. Obviously, the joker in the pack is the Dolphins, the Redcliffe Dolphins. Although they're just listed as the Dolphins because Redcliffe's not in the name, which I think is a bit ridiculous, really. Wayne Bennett effect. Can he take this disparate group of players, because they are outcasts, really. They're the off cuttings that clubs don't want. Yes, they've got some experienced players from the Storm in their forward pack, Kafusi and the Bromwich brothers. I think that will give them some solidity up front. The back line is where I think the concerns really lie. Can they get these disparate players, some of whom are youngsters who are coming through, couldn't get a roster spot because obviously salary cap constraints, which we now know have been eased a little bit. They're still in the market for some other players. It's just getting that first season together, getting the players in camp, the first pre-season as an NRL club. If they make the top 8, that'll be beyond expectations. I don't think they're going to be the worst side. I think there are a few teams on this list that I think are going to be below them in the ladder. I expect them to be competitive, and there's also a hint of the unknown as well. But Wayne Bennett always, without fail, gets a team to the top 8. So this will be a test of Wayne Bennett's management skills as well. He's got a good raft of assistants around him. So we'll see how that plays out for the Dolphins. The Gold Coast Titans, they cannot be as bad as they were last year. They are a better team than that. I think Justin Holbrook had a rough go of it last year. There was mounting pressure on him. The Fafita contract doesn't help. I think their weakness is in the halves. I think that is a problem. Losing Jamal Fogarty, I think, did have a negative impact and a positive impact for the Raiders, negative impact for them. Again, results, that first 5-6 weeks, if they got off to a slow start, it could be a long season. The talent is there on paper. It's in practicality, in practice, on the field, getting it right. They're obviously doing it in training. It's just not working on the field last year. They need to refine that 2021 form. And that tail end of 2020 as well, when they went on a run. Had it been a full season, they would have made the 8. So the previous 2 seasons before last year, they were showing all the right signs, and they took a backward step last year. I think injuries and some squad selections, I think, hurt them. But again, learning curve. They've changed some of the backroom staff around Justin Holbrook. He is a good coach. Let's not knock Justin Holbrook. He knows what he's doing. Admittedly, the Super League is not the same quality as the NRL. I've been saying that for years, and that's as a Brit saying that. But I think the Titans, the pieces are there. It's getting them to gel together. They cannot be as bad as last year. Another red flag, the Sea Eagles, Manly. Anthony Seibold back in coaching. The fallout from Pride jersey or Rainbow jersey. Des Hasler's exit. Are the Trebojevic trio, because it's more than just Jake and Tom now, you've got Ben in there as well. The Trebojevic brothers, who were Hasler's boys, really. How much disunity actually is in that playing squad. They've lost Kieran Foran. That's a big loss to have. He's gone to Gold Coast, which I think will help Gold Coast, actually. Are Manly going up or going down? Because last year the wheels fell off much worse than Brisbane. Brisbane just coasted a little bit and lost a bit of focus. Manly just fell apart after Women in the League round. The jersey fiasco, the handling by the club. Is there too much politics going on? Anthony Seibold, I think he had a bad run of it in Brisbane, but I think the situation at Brisbane was going to happen whoever was the coach there after Wayne Bennett, and the way that was handled. Is he ready to jump back into a coaching gig with all the media crap he took and the social media crap he took? There will be his detractors. Manly, I'm a bit concerned about them, to be brutally honest. Tom Trebojevic, if he gets injured again, what then? I mean, Ruben Garrick had a decent season, but he's no Tom Trebojevic. He's a solid fullback, come winger. Tommy Turbo is, when he's fit, one of the best fullbacks, centres and wingers in the game. You could play him anywhere across those positions. Manly, I've got some concerns about them. I can see them missing the 8. Melbourne Storm, I can see them making the 8, but are they in the top 4 or the bottom 4 of the top 8? They have lost key players from their pack, and it's going to be an interesting one in regards to the Melbourne Storm. I'm not sure they're going to be in the top four. They're going to still be a very, very good side, especially at home. But I do think losing key players in that pack, key leaders in that pack as well, I think is going to start. I mean, yes, they've kept Cameron Munster. Harry Grant's had a fantastic season and a fantastic World Cup. Great Origin campaign. But we shall see. We shall see. Pappenhausen's going to be, when they can get him back fully firing, fully fit. He shatter his kneecap last year. Is he going to be the same player he was before the injury? He's probably going to be a little bit cautious when he first comes back. The Storm is an enigma. We've been saying for years they've got to fall off a cliff eventually. All these great players that have been key parts of their spine moving on. They've still got a spine. They're Hughes and Munster and Grant, I think, are a good spine. But they're no Cameron Smith, Cooper Cronk, and Billy Slater. I mean, there has to come a point where all that speculation surrounding Munster has that become a bit of distraction over last season and into this pre-season. We shall see. We shall see how they play. They're still going to be a top 8 side. They're well coached. Craig Bellamy, he wants to go out on a high. We'll see how they do. Newcastle Knights, they cannot be as bad as they were last year, but what's the Knights' identity? Really, what is the Knights' identity? I'm not sure with this side. They've got some good pieces there. Halfback is a big weakness. Kalen Ponga, do you play him on the wing? Do you play him in the centre? Do you play him at fullback? Do you play him in the halves? He's on big money. He's missed a lot of games through injury. A lot of games. There was the cubicle fiasco when he was obviously first out injured, out on the drink, recovering from a concussion. That's not a good look. There's some culture issues, question marks. I don't know with the Knights. Do they want to be a contending side like they were in the late 90s, early 2000s, or do they want to be mediocre? Because they've had some bad seasons and they've had some decent seasons. They're very inconsistent. I'm not sure with the Knights where they're going to end up. They are an enigma to me. I can't say they're going to make the top 8 or fall off a cliff like they did last year. They need to figure out their identity and quickly. The Warriors, perennial underachievers. Being back in Auckland, I think, will help them. I honestly do. I think when they play at home, look at the fan base, they turn up. Obviously, the last 3-4 years have been very, very difficult for the Warriors. But again, I'm not sure what to expect from the Warriors either. I'm really not. Last season wasn't great. There were some bad defeats. Well, the last couple of years haven't been great. Admittedly, some mitigating circumstances, but there's been some heavy defeats in there. Again, what's the identity with this side? Because there's some great individual players there, but the identity of the team, the direction of the team, recruitment, player development, who's going to be the coach, long term, because they go through coaches quite regularly. There's stability as well. Warriors, much like the Knights, I don't know what to expect. They are an enigma. North Queensland Cowboys, Todd Payton had a brilliant season last year, Coach of the Year. I expect much of the same. I think he's now finally, the message got across, the players have bought in. Not mass player turnover, which is good, keeping the core together. And they, again, much like the Sharks, I think they would have taken a lot from their finals campaign, which didn't really go to plan. But their regular season was fantastic. They got on a run. They got confident. And Tommy Dearden as well, I think, has come of age. He's been fantastic. Taumalolo's finally living up to his contract, which is a bit of a lead weight really when it comes to salary cap considerations and the length of contract. But Taumalolo really bought into Todd Payton, and Todd Payton, I think, is underrated as a coach. That first season at the Cowboys after he left the Warriors, where there were some good signs at the Warriors when he was interim. It took a while for the players to buy in. Last season they were fantastic. They could have that second season syndrome, that come back to earth. I still expect them, should I say, to be in the top 8, but they've lost the hammer. He's gone, so they've lost that backup format. They've lost that X factor you can bring off as an interchange. Excuse me. So again, with the Cowboys, I'm expecting a top 8 side. It's where? That's the question mark. I expect, again, further growth. I think it's going to be a little bit tougher this time round. Same with the Sharks. But Todd Payton's now had a couple of seasons as a head coach in the NRL. He's a bit more experienced than Craig Fitzgibbon, for example, someone I can compare him to. And both the Sharks and the Cowboys could be dangerous for the top 4. It's just a question of can they kick on from last year. Paramount Eels, can they absorb the losses of like Mahoney and others who've moved on from the club? Can they still be a top 4 side? Can they also get over that hump? Was last year their premiership window? Did they miss out? Can Mitchell Moses finally get an NRL premiership? He's a good halfback. Can he become a great halfback? He's solid. He's played Origin. He had a decent World Cup with Lebanon. Admittedly, he didn't get selected for Australia, so he chooses Lebanon. But can they absorb the losses that they have had, and can they beat one of the other big four clubs or those teams that regularly make the finals? Have they shot their bolt? Has the horse bolted? I still expect Parramatta to be in the top eight. It's where. Much like the Cowboys, much like the Sharks, they are a top eight side. Are they still a top four side? And can they actually win those big crunch games like a grand final? Um, so we'll see with them. Penrith, can they go for three in a row? Well, that hasn't been done in the NRL era since 1998. Can they do four grand finals in a row? That hasn't been done for God knows when. Not in my lifetime, at least. I mean, what's the ceiling with this team? Because whenever they lose a player, someone else slots in. Now, losing Kirkow and Coruscant, I think, may have that detrimental impact. But look at their development system, their youth policy, their scouting for other players that they bring into the club. I mean, it's outstanding what they've done since Gus was there, restructuring the youth policy and the scouting and the development structures. It took a little while. It's bearing fruit. They've got a good core together. You know, they've got World Cup winners in there. They've got Origin winners in there for both Queensland and New South Wales. They've got the lot in there. They're still young enough to be at the top for another decade. Some of these players. But can they win three in a row? That's the question. Can they make four grand finals in a row? That's another question. Look, they're still a top four side. With the rule changes over the last 3 years, they're the side I think has been adapting the best to them. However, can other teams who finish below them, can they narrow that gap? Because they were so dominant last year. There's got to become a point where other teams have to raise their game, or Penrith start to have a bit of a down year. They've been so consistent for a good chunk of time now, so dominant. We shall see what happens with them. And losing Serraldo as an assistant, will that have a negative impact? The South Sydney Rabbitohs, Demetriou, it's his second full season as head coach. Again, I think fitness of key players like Latrell Mitchell, for example, will be interesting. Damien Cook, I think, can he sustain his level in the second half of his career? I think South Sydney slightly overachieved last year with their run in the finals. They looked vulnerable at times, but hey, it was their first season post Bennett. Can they still be a top eight side? Or will they start to, again, has their premiership window shut on them? They still got some great players. Alex Johnson on the wing. I mean, he's going to keep scoring tries. That's something. Is like he's going to set some more records there. Latrell Mitchell, keeping him fit is key. And keeping him free from suspension as well. Not only fit to play, but also not suspended. So discipline as well. The forward pack, I think, overachieved last year to a certain extent. Beginning of the year, people said they're going to get bullied. That forward pack was a pretty decent forward pack. But have they overachieved as a squad? There's a few question marks, like Lachlan Ilias, second season syndrome. Can he still, Taff if he has to come in during the Origin period, or if Mitchell goes down injured? There's a few question marks. They've let some players go. They've still got a great, again, much like Penrith and some of the other teams. They're good at scouting players, bringing players in, developing players. But are they able to still compete, make semi-finals and grand finals? We shall see. St George, the Dragons, I can't see them making the eight. That's another divided club, much like the Manly Sea Eagles. The Dragons, I'm not sold on this side. Yeah, Ben Hunt's a brilliant player, and he was one of the few players week in, week out who put 110, 120% in. Obviously, there's question marks about the coach, there's question marks about the board, player development, some of the contracts. But every club has a bad contract. But the Dragons, they had a poor season. Another poor season, another indifferent season. I don't think they can afford to have another one. I don't think the coach can afford to have another one. But we shall see with the Dragons. I mean, they could surprise us. I mean, people saying they're going to get the wooden spoon last year, and they didn't. They performed better than expected. But once they were performing better than expected, when the wheels fell off there, much like Brisbane, they were like, oh, here we go again, another season of average mediocrity. They cannot keep doing that. Again, the Dragons need to find their identity as well. Roosters. Have they been declining the last couple of years? Can they bounce back? I mean, Joey Manu had a fantastic World Cup. Tedesco had a brilliant World Cup. They've got some talent in this side, but look at the players they've lost through injury and retirement. Have they really replaced the Morris twins? Have they really replaced Boyd Cordner, Jake Friend? On a serious note, they've lost a lot of leadership there, a lot of veteran leadership there, who were going to retire soon enough anyway. But I don't think the club were ready to have them retire in the way they did. But their hand was forced a little bit. Now, Trent Robinson is a very, very good coach. There's no doubt on that. But are the Roosters starting to decline? Much like the Rabbitohs, are the Sydney Roosters on the decline a little bit? We've been questioning about the Melbourne Storm. When are they going to start seriously the decline happening? The Roosters have been battling a lot of injuries for a long time. Sualihi, there's question marks. Will he be tempted by Rugby Australia into a union contract? Because there's a lot of noise around a star young player. I mean, Tedesco and Manu are two of the best players in the game. Joey Manu is probably the best all-round outside back in the game because not only can he play fullback, he can play wing, he can play centre, he can play in the halves. Joey Manu he can probably play in the forward back if you asked him to. Tedesco is probably one of the best, if not the best, fullbacks, and he can play him on the wing as well, but one of the best, if not the best, fullback in the game. Does the weight of captaincy weigh on him a little bit? So we'll see with the Roosters, and we'll see if they can continue to be a top 8 side or maybe in a top 4 side. And we'll see if they can have an injury-free season. They can be dangerous, but has their window closed for a couple of years? Do they need to develop Walker a little bit more and some other players to come in to boost that depth? And finally, 20-odd minutes into the video, West Tigers, they cannot be as bad as last year, surely. I do fear for the West Tigers long term. The viability of the team. We know at some point an 18th team will be joining the competition. Does that mean the West Tigers will be split up back into Balmain and the Western Suburbs? Possibly. The West Tigers was so bad last year. They never really recovered from the Tales of Tiger Town documentary, which I think was a bad decision to make on a commercial aspect. I mean, it was entertaining, but also it really highlighted the divisions within that dressing room. A lot more pressure was put on Maguire, Madge, who is not a bad coach. He's won a premiership in the NRL and he's won in the Super League. And he's an international coach. Michael Maguire, Madge, is not a bad coach. The players tuned out. Their roster is a mess. Their youth policy is a mess. And look at the talent they've let go. They went, you're not good enough. You're like Pappenhausen and Adai Carr. You're not good enough. You're too small. Tedesco, okay, you're a bit injury prone. Out the door. And now they've all gone on to do great things with their current teams and with their past teams as well. West Tigers are an enigma to me. They cannot be as woefully bad as they were last year. Now, it's not the worst season on record. The Western Suburb Magpies have that, which is a forerunner to the West Tigers. But they've very rarely made finals, lengthy spell outside the top 8, and letting go of Jackson Hastings and keeping Luke Brooks, with all the noise around Luke Brooks over the last 12 to 18 months, whether he's staying or going, they bring in Jackson Hastings and they let him go. That is a bizarre one. Some of the contracts they've signed, bizarre one. Losing Leilua to the Cowboys benefited Leilua. He left the season early, half a season early, and it benefited him. And it made the West Tigers even worse. He was one of their most consistent players in the forward pack, and Jackson Hastings was their most consistent backline player. They were the only two players, really, in my opinion, that were putting the effort in week to week. Luke Brooks is an enigma. He can be brilliant in one game, useless for the next 3. And there's a lot of pressure on him, which I feel sorry for him because he's undoubtedly got the skills and the talent. It's just not working. Now, Tim Sheens, there's no doubt on his history in the game and his ability as a coach, his ability to talent spot. And Benji Marshall, it's his first coaching gig, proper coaching gig, where he's a full-time assistant. He's not just going and working with a handful of harp. This is Benji Marshall's first assistant coaching gig to become the head coach in 2 seasons' time. If this goes horribly, horribly wrong, horribly wrong. The board guy, we're moving on from you. Does that damage Benji Marshall's reputation? Because he was a brilliant player. He was almost a coach on the field for Wayne Bennett and off the field in the training ground. Brilliant player, knows the game inside out. Tim Sheen's brilliant coach, great spotter of talent, but is this job too big for them? So we'll see what happens with the West Tigers. I mean, there's a couple of sides like the Knights and the Warriors and the Dragons that could also be wooden spoon fodder. But this West Tigers side, have they bottomed out, or is there worse to come? Because they have set themselves out a 2 to 3 year plan to hand over to Benji Marshall and then be ready to be competitive. We could have some really bad times ahead for the Tigers. They could be really bad. That defence cannot be as bad as that. Yeah, okay, they didn't score as many points going forward. They could score some tries, but they weren't. It's the defence that killed them. You can be in low-scoring games and lose 6-4 or 10-6. And put it was the effort was lacking from week to week. There were 60-0 drubbings in there. They cannot be that bad again. But there we go. There's my 2023 NRL season preview. Thank you very much for getting to the end of this nearly half-hour video. I really appreciate that, and hopefully I've done justice to the teams and my thoughts on where they're headed. I mean, I could be completely wrong with all my predictions. Penrith may have a stinker this year, and they might come back to earth, and Brisbane may be in the top 4, and the West Tigers may have a better than expected season. The Dolphins could make the top 8, and really surprise us. The Storm may just touch Mother Earth and be minor premiers again. Or it could all go horribly wrong and the Storm fall off a cliff. The Roosters they're all injured again. Todd Payton gets sacked. Anything can happen. But I do think where teams were at the end of last year going into this, we'll have to see how the pre-season plays out and the trial matches. And those first 5 to 6 weeks will give us a good indication of who's on the up and who's on the down. And then the Origin period will be another indication of when we're going to Origin, the top 8, bottom 8. Is there any separation? Is it condensed? But there we go. First season of 17 teams for a while. And we'll see how it all plays out. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts in the comment section below. And from this POM to you Aussies, I'll have some more content for you very, very soon.